Welcome, guys. In this episode, I wanted to explore how to use Enneagram in a more productive way. The thing is, my day something went bad, and I know my type. Now what? Now how do I use this? And what is like the implication of me knowing my type in a very self growth sort of sense? Like how do I use this in a very practical way? Because if I just listen to all of this, I don't want it to be a mental masturbation. You know what I mean? I want it to be like a much more practical thing as well, which is the goal of this entire series to begin with. So, Susan, so how does Enneagram affect us to begin with? In a very like a primal sense from like a childhood, does it really have an effect on us? Like how your
Mm,
type perceives something?
mhm. So you've asked kind of $1,000,000 question. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
now I think I know what my Enneagram type is. Now what do I do with it? You
Yeah.
know? And so, what is the purpose of studying this thing called the Enneagram? What is the reason I would turn to learning about the fact that I might have what we're calling a type or what they're calling a particular pattern of development, a pattern of adaptive strategies, a pattern of reactivity. Why would I want to learn that? And I think my number one answer is to reduce our suffering. And that's Helen's language, that's David's language, that's Russ Hudson's language, that's Marion Gilbert's language, it's all of our language in the Enneagram community. That what does that mean to reduce my suffering? Well, we actually suffer ourselves
Yeah.
inside of ourselves based on the way we focus our attention,
Mm-hmm.
based on who we believe we absolutely have to be in this world to survive. And survival means I have to defend against threat and danger and violations to my personhood. So I have to
Yeah.
defend myself physically against harm, but I also have to defend myself emotionally against harm, meaning my sense of self forms its own protection system around it. And so warding off threat to my physical self, warding off threat to my emotional sense of self, my identity, is what the Enneagram, what we call the Enneagram, is pointing at. It's pointing at these particular propensities and proclivities and pathways that have organized the direction that our development takes, that the direction or style or structure are of adaptive strategies. So, what is an adaptive strategy? An adaptive strategy is how I have to organize myself to become in order to survive my environment. My environment includes my physical environment, shelter, food, water, people, school, culture, religion, politics, all that. That's all my environment. But the critical environment that I'm really talking about is my parenting caregiver environment. The
Mm.
people I meet when I'm born. When I
Okay.
land on this planet, I meet some people, and I'm completely dependent on these people for my survival. I mean, imagine when we're born, we can't even lift our own head.
Yeah.
We can't turn over. So if we're laying on the crib on our back, we can't flip over onto our stomach. So we're on our back, we get uncomfortable. We only have one solution, is to start screaming for someone to come and pick me up and get me out of that position. That's how dependent we are in the beginning. So we come into this world and we meet these people that are our primary caregiving parenting environment, and we start responding to them, and we
Mm-hmm.
start responding to not only what they're doing for us or to us, but we start responding to what they're not doing to us, how they're not taking care of us.
Mm-hmm.
God willing, all of us come in with wonderful, nurturing parenting caregivers that are consciously ready to meet all of our developmental needs from the day we're born, so that when we cry, when we're hungry, they respond to us immediately. When we're laying on our back and we can't flip over, that they come and they take us and they pick us up and they change our position and they touch us and they comfort us and they soothe us. They soothe our anxiety. They soothe the physical pain in our body. And then they lay us down on our stomach, or they sit us up in a chair, or they hold us. Like, all of these things has to come from another human being in the beginning. So imagine the potential for error in a system like this, when
Mm.
you are 100% dependent on other people. These other people are human. Humans have their own flaws. Human has their own life. Human has their own stress, right? So
Yeah.
we've got these big people who are stressed out. They're tired. They're talking to other people. They have all these other demands, and yet we're 100% dependent. So in order for us to survive, the ways that they have not interacted with us well, or they
Mm-hmm.
have not met our needs well enough in the beginning, we form what's called adaptive strategies, where
Mm-hmm.
we start organizing a way to deal with the pain of
Yeah.
being here on this planet. Does that make sense? So that's an adaptive strategy. So the
Yeah.
Enneagram, studying your Enneagram type really helps us define our particular solution based on my temperamental wiring, which I'm using as an exchange for the word Enneagram type. My temperamental wiring, my particular neural gifts, my biology, my neurology, my spiritual orientation, all the things that go to make up how I'm organized, how I got organized by the time I was born,
Mm-hmm.
and how I had to use myself to form solutions to pain. And what is this pain defined as? Pain is defined as, I'm laying on my back. I've been on my back for 4 hours. My back's hurting. That's pain,
Yeah.
right? I, you know, Infants don't know they're hungry. Infants start crying to be nursed or to eat because their body hurts. Hunger hurts, right? It's an ache in the stomach. So the baby doesn't know, I want some milk right now. The baby's like, ow, ow, and it starts crying. And then, of course, in Western society, some brilliant doctor back in the 50s decided to tell women not to respond to a crying baby when it's hungry, that it should be on a feeding schedule. And sometimes these babies would be there crying for an hour with this excruciating pain in their body that was so overwhelming. And mom was standing there going, nope, I can't feed you for an hour. And of course, I've seen women, they're completely distraught because their own body is reacting to this screaming child, and our natural human instinct is to respond to the needs of the infant, but we override that with our mind, having read some book that tells us not to respond to the child. So now I've got a child who's starving and in pain for an hour.
Mm.
What is that baby going to do with that pain? How much longer can it tolerate the pain of not being heard, the not being considered, the laying there screaming? It has to form some kind of an adaptive strategy, has to form some kind of contraction against the pain. So this is kind of how we start out in this world. And I'll give you a look. So we come in,
Yeah.
we're born as a set of temperamental proclivities and propensities, meaning my central nervous system is born with some kind of resources to be human and to deal with what I'm going to deal with here. I'm ready to meet my parents, and I'm ready to respond to them somehow, and ready to
Mm-hmm.
respond to life. And then I'm in my crib and I'm laying on my back and I'm screaming because my back is hurting and I can't roll over. Nobody comes.
Yeah.
Then I'm on a feeding schedule thanks to Dr. Spock, right? And then my parents are not getting along. They're screaming and they're fighting, and I'm hearing all this yelling, and my body's filling with anxiety, and I can't get away from it. I'm scared. And then I'm 2 years old, and I wake up out of a nightmare, and I go into my parents' room, and I opened the door to try to crawl in bed with them, and my father smacked me upside the head. This is a true story. Knocks me down on the floor and tells me never to come in their room again. I'm only 2 years old, and I'm absolutely in so much pain because what I needed was love, and I got hit, and I got rejected, and I got shamed, and this happens to me. There's a lot of pain here. So now I don't know this has happened to me because all I did was adapt at every turn that I needed to survive the emotional pain,
Mhm.
who I was allowed to be, who I couldn't be, needs that were met, needs that were not met. And I end up like this. And then I'll show you. And then I'm an adult and I fall in love.
Yeah.
I meet this person. And neither one of us know that anything has happened to us. A lot
Yeah.
of times. Or we have some, yeah, my mom was an alcoholic, but it wasn't that bad. I mean, this is how people usually talk. No, I had a great childhood. Yeah, I was beaten, but I deserved it. Well,
Sure.
until we unpack all of these scrunched up, adapted, exiled, injured, wounded parts of self, and I have no idea that when I get triggered or reactive, when somebody doesn't meet a need of mine, and I get so mad at them, I really believe it's because they didn't meet my need. I have no idea because I'm walking around this scrunched up with this much pain hidden in my body from my own needs not being met when I was 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old.
Mhm.
No
Yeah.
idea. I think it's your fault and you think it's my fault.
Mhm.
This is
Yeah.
why I focus so much of my work on actually relationships, because two people usually are trying to have a relationship with the other person's defense mechanisms. And we all know how successful that's going to be, right? This is why we have
Yeah.
50% of the marriages right now end in divorce. We've got so much acrimony in families. We've got children that are incredibly wounded, that think they came out of healthy families and are completely not aware. This is the work of Dr. Gabor Mate right now, which is amazing. So why learn the Enneagram? Oh, when someone doesn't pay attention to me right away, I get really angry. I can't feel unimportant. It hurts too bad. When someone doesn't hear me or see me or care about how I feel, I'm pissed. Oh, wow. Oh my gosh, I'm an Enneagram type 4. And I'm starting to learn how sensitive I am to people not hearing me or validating what I say. And then I'm like, oh, and I'm a type 8. And anybody who gets in my way or tries to tell me what to do, I'm furious. Oh, wow, oh yeah, I can't handle that. I have to be strong. I can't be vulnerable. So the Enneagram, based on whatever type we are, I'm a type 1. Oh my God, I don't have to fix everything I see that's wrong. I don't have to correct everybody's language when they're talking to me. I
Don't have to
don't
organize that painting.
I don't have to straighten the painting on the wall in everybody's house when I visit.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And so thanks to the Enneagram, I start realizing how my particular temperamental sense of who I am, I have to be and I cannot be. This is called the trap and the avoidance in the Enneagram. As I start to look at this, I start to maybe loosen some of this. And I start to understand, wow. And when I correct people mid-sentence, I'm hurting people, even though I've been believing I've been correcting them fairly and everyone should be corrected, right? That's type 1's belief system. Well, what if correcting everybody every time is really not the best thing to do, even though I think it's the
Yeah.
right thing to do? David Daniels once said to me, Suzanne, he said, doing what's right is not always best. And I'm like, what does that mean? But so as I start to unravel my belief system about who I am, who I have to be, who I
Mhm.
can't, I start realizing how certain needs of mine were not met when I was a child in my family system. Then I realize that I have more response flexibility. And what that means is before this wound right here, if somebody triggered this wound right here, I had to respond to it. I had to get reactive. I had to fight it. I had to withdraw. I had to start sulking. I had to fight back. But if I learn about that wound and I learn about that part of myself and I relax that ammunition that's ready to get
Mhm.
triggered inside of me, and I relax it. I still have this awareness about myself, but it doesn't trigger this big explosive reaction in me like it used to. This is why we study the Enneagram. Because otherwise, and you and I were talking about before, people go, "Oh yeah, I need to work on myself. Yeah, I need to work on myself." Okay, what do I do?
Yeah.
Where do I start? I got to work on myself. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I keep getting mad at people. Okay, but people are messed up, man, and that person pissed me off. And
It's like
like,
wake up 4 a.m. in the morning, that's the solution.
right. Or
Yeah.
oh my God, all this anxiety. I have so much anxiety and I can't stop worrying about stuff. And but someone needs to worry about it because I'm the one that's always worried about things because I'm so responsible and I'm so dutiful. So you see, we trying to work on yourself just between you and your own mind, you're just going to go in a big circle. So what's so beautiful about the Enneagram is it's like, oh my gosh, there's 9 different patterns of adaptive strategies that are based on some kind of resource I had within myself from the beginning
Yeah.
to survive on this planet. And my gosh, it's not my fault that I get triggered like that because I've been hating myself for years because I behave that way, but I don't know how to change it. So the Enneagram is the biggest de-shaming personal self-assessing tool I've ever come across, that I've ever tried to learn about myself when I set out in my life 20 years ago to figure out who the heck I was and why my life was falling apart and why I was going through this horrible divorce and everything was happening in my life that I didn't want. I'm like, oh, okay. And people say, well, you need to work on that. You need to work on yourself. I had no idea what to look at. I really thought it was all happening out here. And that if everything
Mhm.
was under control, I was going to be just fine. But unfortunately, as a type 1, I encountered a human being I absolutely couldn't get control of, couldn't fix what was happening, couldn't stop what was happening, couldn't correct their behavior. So what happened is I suddenly had to look at myself because everything I thought would work, every one of my adapted strategies, everything I told myself I had to be was failing
Mhm.
and turned me this way. I'm so lucky that I landed in the with a chance to study the Enneagram because Dr. David Daniels was coming in to this company that I was working at. It was an organization
In
development
Japan.
company. No, it was actually here in the United States.
Oh.
That was a different part of my life, but David Daniel was being hired to work with CEOs in this organization development company that I was part of. And we were doing leadership training for managers and CEOs and company executives. And they were bringing in David Daniels to work with CEOs. And that's purely through accident, really, that I started studying the Enneagram while I was there in my workplace. I was like, oh my gosh, what is this? And I started seeing things that I had no understanding about before. I learned what a defense mechanism was. I learned what an adaptive strategy was. I learned all these different components of anger. I learned all these different components of fear. I learned all these different components of the distress when we don't feel connected or approved of. I started learning about myself with the language of the Enneagram and also seeing that we're all wired differently. And I did not know that before. I thought we all had the same playing field. I thought we were all working from the same kind of mind. I had no idea the impact of trauma on a childhood because a lot of the teachings in the United States are like, that's in the past. Deal with it now. Well,
Yeah. Keep moving forward.
keep moving forward. Yeah, why dwell
Don't
on
look back.
that doesn't matter. That was a long time ago. I mean, there's a lot of myths in the way that we develop. There's a lot of misunderstandings. There's a lot of denial. There's a lot of, you can't, oh, why waste your time going back there? That's not where the answers are. The answers are in today. And, there's a lot of motivational teachers and motivational gurus online and everything, just worry about today, the present moment. Well, the present moment is where we can activate any kind of change, but we need to understand, we need to take a look at
Mhm.
what happened. And so this is called level of developmental well-being.
Mhm.
How well am I put together by the time I hit adulthood? How many crinkles have I got in my system? How many things did I have to adapt to? Did I have something called big T trauma? And big T trauma is also represented in what's called the ACE studies, the Adverse Childhood Experience Study, which was 17,000 interviewees by Kaiser Permanente started looking at the connection between health and childhood. Like an amazing study, groundbreaking study. And the big T trauma are things like your parents had a rancorous divorce, you have a parent who's incarcerated, you were beaten, you were severely neglected, you didn't have a father, you have an alcoholic parent, et cetera, et cetera. Those are big T traumas. You were sexually violated, you were abandoned and put in foster care. These are big T trauma. And then we have little T trauma. Now, little T trauma are things like your parents are arguing a lot and very preoccupied. Your parents are very stressed. They don't have a lot of private time with you. They don't really have time to take a delight in you. They are, you walk up to your mom and she's washing dishes and you're like, let's say you're 4 years old, you went uppy, like you need some soothing. You're feeling stressed in the world. You need to be soothed by the regulating brain of an adult who's non-stressed, who's attentive. But so you're reaching up for mom and she's like, go on, I don't have time for you right now.
Yeah.
That's trauma. So I need help soothing my central nervous system. Something has just threatened me or made me feel insecure or scared me. And I go to regulate my emotions with my big person, and big person just rejects me. Those are injuries to my system of self and my ability to manage my own overwhelm. So now what do? I kind of gather myself up and I go over in the corner. Maybe I start sucking my thumb alone. I'm trying to calm myself
Yeah.
down, but I'm alone trying to soothe myself with a central nervous system that's immature. So this is all big T trauma, little T trauma. And I'll tell you another kind of trauma. This is really an interesting kind of trauma. So my parent, I'm going to say almost all parents love their kids. I have
Yeah.
met some pretty damaged humans that, probably didn't have the capacity to love their children and they're extremely, extremely abusive. But let's not talk about them right now. Let's generally say parents really love their child.
Yeah.
However, how the child receives that experience of love is really what this is all about. So a parent might absolutely love its child, but doesn't really know how to parent, doesn't know how to take delight in the child, might have some really interesting views of parenting that's preventing that adult from expressing itself in a healthy way. So even though the parent loves the child might actually grow up not feeling loved at all. And one of the ways that we do this is through conditional parenting. So unless you behave exactly as I want to, I reject you. I give you a timeout. I don't let you come in my presence. I lock you in your room. I make you stand in the corner. I humiliate you unless you behave the way I want. This is conditional parenting. So unless you meet my conditions, you're not acceptable. Well, what happens with 9 different temperamental personality proclivities? You have some children are really noisy and boisterous and big energy, like a little type 8 child. But if that parent only likes that child when they're quiet, when they're still, what happens to this little rambunctious child who loves to knock things over and see how powerful they are and push the table and push the chairs? What happens to that child with that parent? They get rejected. Stop that. You're always making noise. Stop that. Go outside. Get out of here. So
Yeah.
that child starts getting the message through this negative mirroring. I'm not acceptable. I'm not loved the way I am. And there's a lot of things that starts to happen here depending on the temperament. How does that child survive that recrimination by that parent? Some children completely pull in if they have this resource. Let's say they're, a little type 4 child. It's like, oh, I won't show you who I am. And they start to hide themselves and they start to withdraw and they get really quiet, but their natural personality might not be that adaptive strategy. So
Yeah.
they've adapted to behave a certain way in front of that parent that is not their authentic self.
Yeah.
This causes a lot of disconnect. Unconditional love creates growth and development and potentiation. Conditional love does this. This is
Yeah.
happening in our society more than you can ever describe. I like you when you behave. I don't like you when you don't. And here's my description of good behavior. And each parent has another different kind of, set of
Yeah.
language,
Yeah.
what good behavior means. And if you don't fit that norm in your family, you're in trouble psychologically because you're not accepted. And then let's say this same person, she's got this exuberant little type 8 little fellow, and then her second boy is a type 5. And he's just
Yeah.
naturally more quiet. He's more observing. He tends to sit back and watch things, and he doesn't really inject himself. And he's up in his head a lot. And he likes to be in his room tinkering around and playing with his models and his, puzzles. So we've got a type A, rambunctious, noisy, jumping on the bed, pushing things over, climbing trees, getting dirty. And you have this other little boy who's a type 5. For some reason, mommy loves the little type 5 boy because she sees that as good behavior. And her type 8 child who's challenging her, expressing his anger toward his mother, that child is not getting met and mirrored in a positive way. So the type 5 feels really good about who he is, and the little type 8 starts to develop an image of self that is harmful,
Yeah.
painful, not acceptable. So this is all going on in family systems all the time. So
Yeah.
the little boy, the little 5 that's feeling pretty good about himself, he grows up more like this, right? He stays, maybe he's got a couple, but he's like, he's getting mirrored, he's getting supportive, he's getting this positive attention, he's getting unconditional positive regard. So he's kind of like this. And here's the type 8 kid.
Yeah.
He's so injured. And these two boys came from the same family. And you're like, what the heck happened? This one's got addiction problems. This one's, in and out of juvenile hall. This one's excelling and on his way to Harvard. And what happened? So this is why using the Enneagram to not only understand ourselves, like what happened to me, but also as a parent, what I'm expecting of these different little temperaments that come into my life as children. How am I interacting with one in a way that I'm not interacting with the other? And what is the impact of that on development, on the developmental well-being of this child? And we all come out of childhood somewhere. We all come out of childhood at some different level of crumple, okay? We could call it levels of crumple. So, and every person you meet has got a story of how self-accepting they were encouraged to be, how non-accepted they were in their family, if they were expected to be different, if they were acknowledged for who they were, if they were applauded who they naturally were, or if they were frowned upon. So I'll tell you a story about a friend of mine who is kind of a bodybuilder fellow, very masculine,
Okay.
type 6. Okay. And he's got his son. He has a son who's a type 4. Now he doesn't know anything about the Enneagram. He just knows his son likes to draw and he's really artistic and he tends to be sort of a slighter body
Introvert.
type, kind of thin, not a
Yeah.
muscular little fellow. And he's like, so dads, kids, he's starting kindergarten and his little boy is kind of frail and he's really sensitive. He cries really easy. And the father's like, oh my God. And, and then by the time this little boy who is, it's got more feminine energy. He's delicate. He loves flowers. He loves to draw. He's so sweet. He likes to help his mom. And this father's going crazy and he's feeling shame. This is my son. I got to toughen up my son. So what does he do? He rolls his son in football. Okay. It's like, I don't know, flag football, 8 or 9 years old. He puts him in football, which this little kid has no interest in playing football. He doesn't like to fight. He doesn't want to fight with other boys. He's starting to get bullied in school. Anyway, long story short, dad goes to pick him up on his first day of football and he sits to the coach, okay, where's my son? Where, he sees all the boys are tackling and they're all over the
Yeah.
field. And I was like, where? Oh, and he sees this boy and his boy's way down in the corner chasing a butterfly. And he's
Okay.
like, oh, God. So what's happening to this little type 4 boy with this macho, toughen him up father who really wanted a different kind of son. What is happening to this little boy? How easy is it for this little boy to accept himself, and the father will not mirror who he is, keeps wanting his son to be somebody different, keeps wanting to toughen him up, trying to roughhouse him. He's trying to get rough with him in the house. And this little boy is like, that's not who I am, Dad. But when we're 4 and we're 5 and you're 6 years old, we don't know how to look at these big people that are like gods to us and say, that's not who I am, Dad. I appreciate you trying to toughen me up, but I'm a different personality.
Yeah.
Children don't have language like this, right?
Yeah.
So
That would be weird if someone spoke like that.
that's right. Like, whoa, when you're sitting there, a little child is sitting there and he's like listening to his parents screaming in the other room. And he's like, this little child doesn't say to himself, my parents are very stressed and they don't know how to handle their emotional
It's their
reactivity.
childhood trauma, guys. It's their childhood trauma. It'd be like, whoa.
Right. So the
It's like a
kid,
different species, huh?
yeah, so it's all being absorbed inside of us. So here we are. We come out of we come into adulthood and we're kind of like this, and we have no idea. We think we're all still like this. I'm fine. I'm totally fine. I'm just fine. We're full of intimacy disorders. We're full of reactivity. We can't take feedback. We're paranoid that people don't like us. We're trying to fit in, to the point now where people think they're even born in the wrong body, so, it's like, oh, well, this didn't happen, but it must be that I was born in the wrong body. That's why. That's the answer. I'll just change my body. Oh, this will go away. Well, that's not how it really works. So level of developmental well-being is pretty much how much internal suffering against myself am I experiencing? How response flexible am I? How reactive am I? What is the intensity of my reactivity and the frequency of my reactivity? If I were to sum it up, is when someone says, well, how do I know what my level of development is? I say, well, how often in a given day are you reactive? And what's the level of intensity? How many things can you, how many things can you hear or experience that you don't have to react to? Can you soothe yourself? Can you be with discomfort in your body? Can you be with the fact that someone has just shared they don't like you and it absolutely not destroy you? Can you be with conflict? Can you communicate your feelings? Can you say to someone, hey, you hurt my feelings yesterday. Can we talk about it? Now, that's a really adult way to go about it, but how many of us can do that without forming, another strategy where we start sulking or we go avoidant or we start a campaign against that person or,
Sure.
their reputation,
Go.
So how developmentally healthy I am, or how developmentally healthy am I not? So working with Enneagram Prison Project for years and going into the prisons and the jails, I would say I met individuals in there that lived their life where they were pretty much reactive 80% of their day.
Okay.
That they were completely dysregulated emotionally 80% of the day. That you couldn't look at them wrong without them feeling unimportant. That a young man that I met who killed someone at age 16 was so injured inside, obviously did not get the mirroring he needed to love himself properly, just felt like a worthless nothing. And he's in a car and he pulls up and he sees a group of guys that he knows, and he pulls up in his car and he says, hey, John, I'm here. Well, John doesn't turn around. Now, what are the reasons that John didn't turn around?
Didn't hear him.
Didn't hear him.
Yeah.
What's another reason?
Had earphones.
Had earphones. Absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
Engaged in something else.
Yeah.
Well,
probably thinking something deeper.
Could have been thinking something deeper. Could have
checking
been
out a girl. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think this young man at 16 years old, what do you think his reason was for why John didn't turn around?
He doesn't like me.
He didn't turn around because I'm worthless. That's not what he thinks, but that's what he believes deep down. This is in the subconscious. So this is what it is. John, I'm here. Okay. One more time he calls out. John still doesn't turn around. So guess what he does? Because he's feeling so invalidated. He's feeling so unimportant. He can't bear it. His level of developmental well-being is so crumpled up. There's no space inside of him for himself. There's
Yeah.
no space inside him to say, oh, I bet John didn't hear me. When you have a fragile self system, your belief becomes the worst possibility path you can imagine. Suddenly that's the one you grab onto, and that's the real one. So the real reason he doesn't turn around is that he thinks I'm a piece of shit, and he's treating me like I'm a piece of shit, and nobody treats me like I'm a piece of. So guess what? Pulls out a gun and he shoots him, and he kills him. And I met this man. He is now 38 years old in prison. So he spent 20 years in prison at this point. And
So
he
the
said,
life sentence?
yeah, got a life sentence. And he said it took him 18 years to break the grip of being a nothing, that he finally didn't blame John, that he finally realized the ammunition of I'm worthless was living inside of him the whole time. And where did that come from? So that's level of developmental well-being. Had this boy been properly nurtured, loved, taken a delight in, and had good guiding parents, he might have said, oh, let me go walk up to John and tap him on the shoulder. He would have had the confidence. He would have saw that John might be preoccupied. And let's say John really does dislike this boy. Maybe John really hates him. He would have been able to handle that too. Oh, yeah, John didn't turn around because he doesn't like me. Oh, I like me. Right? So that's what happens when this is what happens. So that's the level of developmental well-being. And, to get really honest with the level at which we come out of childhood, which most people think they came out of childhood really enlightened.
Yeah.
And when you
Sure.
true, I see myself on that level of development.
I'm woke, guys.
I'm
I'm
really up
woke.
at the top there, and I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah. So the truth is, in an average Western household, being raised in the society of right now, most of us come out of childhood at a pretty low level of developmental well-being, with only one center of intelligence really working for us, whether it's head center, heart center, or gut center. They're driving from that one center of intelligence. You're in what's called, Gurdjieff would call, mechanistic man. You're just running on compulsions and impulses. You're not really aware. We're sort of asleep. That's where most of us come out of childhood in this culture, because there's so many things that we have normalized in this culture that is not conducive, that doesn't create the best environment for our particular brain development as human beings. We've lost contact with our kids. Our kids are in daycare at 6 weeks old. They're neglected. We prop them up on a pillow, stick a bottle in their mouth, and we're off doing something else.
Yeah.
None of that develops brains the way they're supposed to. None of that develops the limbic system to its capacity. So we've got a lot of challenges in us, in society, to actually raise kids that maybe come out of childhood looking more like that, where their self system is adequately developed. They have adequate contact to their authentic self, their authentic feelings, that they can articulate and speak to their feelings without shame or self-recrimination or a panic that they won't get accepted. They've got this solidity to the development of self. And that's, I'll tell you something, it's rare. It's rare to see a young person today that is intact, as and I've heard some of the work of Gabor Mate and some of the indigenous peoples. Those children were tended to. At 12 or 13 years old, they were being initiated into their adult selves, and there was this radiance in them. They knew who they were. They were not full of toxic shame and dislocated from the authentic personhood and their authentic value. They were very dislocated from it. So that's level of developmental well-being. And that's that's the reason to study the Enneagram, is to start giving ourselves permission without shame to look at this, and I got to the point where I'm like, oh my God, I came out of childhood with a pretty big intimacy disorder. I'm like, yeah, I did. And you can say that without feeling you're completely unworthy, or that you're a lost cause, or that no one will love you. You can actually look at yourself with a lot of grounding and a lot of compassion, as David would teach. Compassion for what I had to adapt to, how I used my Enneagram type structure to adapt to the pain that I was introduced to with my parenting caregiver environment. No one's to blame here. My parents aren't to blame, but they are at fault, right? So I have to look at how their stress, their marriage, their difficulties. I was an immigrant from Canada, so I was a latchkey kid. My parents were both working crazy hours to try to make ends meet. There was a lot of neglect in my childhood. So to look at that with loving discernment from my parents doing their best and what me and my brother had to adapt to, and the strategies that he and I had to deploy in order to survive that neglect, being an immigrant, getting bullied, having an accent, being made fun of. There's like all these things in my school years that caused a lot of pain for myself and my brother, just, being dislocated from our extended family, et cetera, coming to a new country, so now how do you work on this? This is a really big part of the Enneagram, Prem, that's so important to talk about, is that I can learn this cognitively, what my Enneagram type is. I can learn all about defense mechanisms. I can learn all about adaptive strategies. I can learn about the 3 instincts. I can learn about the resources my Enneagram type tends to have naturally imbued in it, which is really important to understand. When I walk into a room as a type 1, when something is not spaced right or crooked, I mean, I see it like that, like, boom, I see it right away. It's a gift, and all 9
Yeah.
types have different gifts. Like you as a 7, you have your gifts. If I can learn all that intellectually,
Yeah.
to actually do this work, I've got to reignite what's in my heart. I've got to get back to my authentic feelings and not be afraid of them. And then I actually have to track the sensations of reactivity in my body. And this is where the rubber hits the road. This is where the work actually happens. Without doing this somatic work to track what Marianne Gilbert is saying, the felt sense lens of perception, I will
Okay.
not be able to change my reactivity. My
Yeah.
15-year-old that shot his friend John, he will not be able to soothe the pain of feeling worthless
Yeah.
until he actually tracks where that pain hit in the body. The moment John didn't turn around, something happened to the guy that I met in prison. The moment John didn't respond right away, what happened to him? Some kind of
Yeah.
horrible, oh my God, oh my
Kind
God.
of takes you over, right?
Yeah, it takes you over, and it
Yeah.
happens in the body. That feeling of anxiety, or like the blood was draining out of him, metaphorically, that he was a big nothing, that was a somatic experience that he needs to learn to become friends with, so he doesn't have to shoot someone because they didn't turn around. So it's all in the body. And we were talking last time about how 7s go into this, it's everything takes on a state of urgency. Like I've got a
Yeah.
impulse right now, and I thought of it, and I got to act on it, and I had an idea, and I got to go with it. It's like that urgency is happening in the body.
Yeah.
And how do you tame that? How do you be
Yeah.
with it differently? Because the only answer until you learn this, the only answer is to follow it as a 7. You can't sit still with it. Once you get that dopamine, and once you get that adrenaline, and once you get that excitement that you're supposed to go over there or think of that, how do you stay here unless you start working with what that feels like in your body?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think if I spoke to you like 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I think I would have interrupted you every like 5 minutes.
And
But
that's very,
Susan, yeah, yeah,
7s are fast, right? And
yeah,
there's a
yeah,
level of stimulation in the system of 7 that that is organizing your gifts, but it also sets you up for these liabilities of interrupting people, moving too fast, not sitting still, getting bored quick, right?
Yeah. So, I have a couple of questions, right? So let's go back, because what you're saying, it feels like a thread, but you know how a thread is made up of a lot of tiny thread like woven together, like, I want to like take them apart and kind of like look at what is happening in what sequence. So for me, right, you begin with saying that to reduce suffering, right? Enneagram is done for reduce suffering. I want to challenge that understanding a little bit, because this is a very seven perspective. I thought about it and I'm like, yeah, I think this is what a seven would say, because you know why once I say it. Because for me, in past, suffering had intellectually the same quality of pain. Let's say I put my finger on a hot stove, so there's a high intensity sensation and it slowly reduces in intensity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
However, I feel suffering has a quality of almost transforming, or almost as a consequence. You know what I mean? Something happens as a consequence. I'm suffering, and I stop suffering when something about the perspective or my relationship to that aspect of reality changes. And the analogy I have for that is, if you go to like a shop, if you go to your piano shop and you see the most beautiful piano in that shop, and you're playing it and everything plays perfectly except this one key, you know, and the instinct isn't to throw the piano, right? You take the time to oh, let me just tune the key. But when it happens to my body and different aspects of my reality, my instinct is to like just throw it. It's like another wrinkle in that paper. You know what I mean? Is
Mhm.
that I hear that dissonance of that key and do not know how to fix it. And as
Yeah.
a consequence of that, I'm suffering more. But if I take the time to like tune that key into the right frequency, and once that sounds good, now I no longer suffer. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and let me ask you this question, because this comes up with sevens a lot. What is not allowing you to take the time?
I for me, it is just not even understanding how to approach the situation in a way that I can apply in my own life. Because I think I'm a very intellectual guy. One
Yeah.
thing I've lacked in my early life, I think even now, is I have a very good intellectual understanding of it, but how do you practically implement it?
So let's go back. What is not allowing you to take the time? What's happening in your body when you just want to go, "Ugh," just chuck
Yeah,
the
yeah,
piano
yeah,
and get out of there? What is the impossible somatic experience that you got to get away
yeah.
from?
It's interesting
That
because, yeah, that's an interesting question, because last time we spoke, you used this term called you have like this adrenaline and cortisol, all these not so feel good chemicals just flood your body. And I noticed that in my body as well. And I
yeah.
called it, and I was talking to you how I try to like label it and try to like see what you talk about in like my own experience. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I see the urgency pop up, and I see my body reacting to me not reacting to that thought. Like a thought arises. Like I was watching a YouTube video of a saxophone player, and I thought, you know what? I should drop everything and learn music. Then
Mhm.
10 years later, I can be the saxophone player as well. And then I told, okay, you know what? Let me take a step back and just see what happens if I don't react with it. And now my body has a response to not reacting to that thought, because I'm just staying still,
Yeah.
and it's just like a flood of lots of feel good emotion, and I call it AC rush, which is like adrenaline cortisol rush from like our previous
I love
conversation. I'm
that.
like,
An AC rush.
yeah,
Okay.
it's like I'm like trying to like gamify this. I'm like, okay, this
Yeah.
is AC rush, and my situation right now is this AC rush comes and I do not know what to do next. So I'm like, okay, this is the part where I kind of explore my options and see what kind of works in my experience. You know what I mean? So it's like a very slow process, I feel.
Well, the body is slow. We can intellectually understand something faster than we can gain capacities in the soma, in the body, to hold the charge of your AC rush.
Sure,
So
sure.
noticing you're having an AC rush, now that's really powerful, and not acting on it in the same way is the beginning of
Yeah.
a lot of developmental capacity here. But you're sitting there with this big energy in your body, not acting on it. And this is where the consciousness and the mindfulness happens. The breathing needs to happen, right? Because
Yeah.
the breathing, the oxygen actually relaxes cortisol. So taking in big breaths and filling our body with oxygen is a really critical thing for any one of us trying not to explode having been triggered by something. It's to bring the oxygen in and get the oxygen moving through the body, start relaxing the cortisol and relaxing the adrenaline. When we get triggered, we hold our breath.
Yeah.
And so it's to learn to breathe.
Yeah. Even
And
in animation, that is the animation that they animate. Like they
yeah,
just
we
oh,
hold
that's
our
what
breath.
they animate. Yeah. Yeah, they hold their breath.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the defense system, when we're really in a state of defense, we hold our breath, which allows cortisol and adrenaline to build up in the blood so that we can run faster than we've ever run. We can fight stronger than we've ever fought. It actually, and when you have a lot of adrenaline in your system and you're in a real state of physical threat, people can climb fences and go up trees. I can't even understand how they did it. And they can run faster than they've ever run before. It's meant for that. It's meant to
Yeah.
save our life. And then, of course, after the emergency is over, then we shake or we cry,
Yeah.
or, then it starts to come out another way. But we hold our breath so cortisol and adrenaline, norepinephrine can build up in the bloodstream in
Yeah.
order to save our lives. But when it's not physical threat we're experiencing, but a threat to our identity, we have the same exact
Yeah.
biochemical reaction, norepinephrine, adrenaline, and cortisol, but it's because my friend didn't turn around.
Yeah.
I'm not being threatened by a lion. I'm being threatened by my own interpretation of this moment. I'm being threatened by the suffering of being worthless. And my brain
Yeah.
doesn't, the suffering of being worthless to the brain, the pain of that emotional suffering is in the same part of the brain as if somebody were to chop my hand with
Chopping.
a. It's the same part of the brain registers pain, whether it be emotional pain or physical pain. And this is so important to understand. When John doesn't turn around and I interpret his not turning around as I'm worthless and he must think I'm worthless and nobody treats me like I'm worthless because I believe I'm worthless. That's really the problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to attack John because I can't tolerate this pain. That's the
Yeah.
suffering. That's the unnecessary suffering caused by interpretations that were organized in an identity that was not properly mirrored, that was not properly nurtured,
Yeah.
not properly soothed when I was younger,
Yeah.
mixed with my Enneagram structures,
Mm-hmm.
particular sensitivities to certain kinds of data in the environment. So
Yeah.
that's the key. That's the
Yeah.
key. So now it's in the same part of the brain. So, when Dr. Gabor Mate says, when people are addicted, everyone's like, well, you got to stop that addiction. Your problem is the addiction. Gabor Mate says, no, it's not why the addiction. The addiction is not the problem. It's why the pain. Why is that part of the brain needing medication? Why am I soothing emotional pain or physical pain? The addiction to medicating the self is medicating the self. I'm most likely medicating emotional suffering. I'm worthless. I'm not good enough.
You
And
too.
of course, we all, a lot of us get addicted to substances because it started out as medicating physical pain. I broke my back, I broke my leg, they give me Percocet, they give me Valium, they give me painkillers because I've hurt my body. And the person that gets addicted to those painkillers, guess what else they're suffering? That is now getting fixed by this barbiturate that I was given because I broke my back. But I'm laying there after I broke my back, and suddenly, for the first time in my life, I love myself. I've never felt that before. because I'm constantly suffering
Yeah.
emotional pain. And then I take this medication for my back pain, and suddenly I love myself. Now I'm hooked, right? And so my brain is set up to need relief before I ever broke my leg, or before I ever
Brain is
broke.
set up to seek relief, right? So,
Absolutely.
so like, let me organize this a bit, okay, and let me organize this understanding a bit from like the paper to this thing, okay, and you can like just correct me if I'm wrong somewhere. And this is my understanding of it. So, so a baby is born, and the white sheet of paper itself has some needs that it wants to meet, some survival needs, right? For example, the food, water, mostly, milk, maybe. So these survival needs. Now,
Holding,
yeah,
soothing,
holdings.
attention. Yeah.
See, as a guy, see, even naturally as a guy, I'm just noticing, yeah, food, water, milk.
I
Yeah,
just need
boom.
food and water.
That's it.
Let me in the ground and I'll be fine.
Yeah, you're bringing the more feminine energy here. Yeah,
You know,
like
babies
soothing,
cry for physical needs and they cry for emotional needs.
emotional needs. Yeah,
And this is what parents, I just fed them, I just changed their diaper, they're warm.
yeah,
What
it
are you
changes it.
crying for? Oh,
Yeah,
they need to be held. Oh, yeah. They need
yeah, add
they
that to the
need
list.
they need someone looking at them so they know that they're here. Oh, that need. Yeah,
Mm, that's
super
the yeah. So that needs have to be met. So that itself, you're saying, has a mechanism through which body innately kind of has a built-in grooves, let's say, like an origami paper almost, a built-in shape through which a built-in set of creases where it's kind of like naturally meant to react this way, you know, to pursue their needs in the expression that they see fit. Now,
well,
it,
this process, this process,
yeah,
put my little person on here. The process of splitting off parts of ourself,
yeah,
our system, our neurobiological system is a biopsychosocial system that the moment there's stress, we are ready to crumple. This
yeah.
is the defense mechanism of humans. So all humans come ready to defend.
Okay. So you're saying even before that natural expression takes place in the baby, they're almost reacting to
Everything.
experience that, yeah. So you're saying, okay, a baby is there. Now it's experiencing an emotion that it deems unpleasant. And now it has a reaction to that experience, right? Because it wants that need to be met. But in that process, it discovers other needs that are also not met, like, holding, cuddling, and stuff like that. But when that need is not met, it also crumples this. Now, I want to explore this crumple a bit more to see what is
Yeah.
exactly that crumple in a person. And
Yeah.
from what I'm trying to understand is it's trying to create a crease, or it's trying to like morph its self-expression in a way that works in
Yeah.
that moment.
Let me help you a little bit. So
Yeah, yeah,
this is, this is metaphorical, but what's happening really, the baby doesn't know its needs are not getting met because it doesn't have enough
yeah,
brain to realize I I really need milk right now and I'm not
yeah,
getting it. It doesn't know that. It's in so much pain in the central nervous system that the survival functions of the body kick in to save your life, because you're hitting a state of overwhelm. You've got too much cortisol, too much norepinephrine, too much adrenaline. And have you ever seen a baby that its needs are not tended to? Their face is bright red. It's completely destabilized. It's kicking and the arms are going all over. It's got so much stress hormones running through the body. It's going nuts. And so what has to happen is the body has to contain that pain somehow, or your central nervous system is going to fry. The nerve endings are frying. It's like short circuiting. It's like too much electricity, too much biochemistry. So kind of what happens is, it kind of gets encapsulated. So the body This is
like
really
an impression.
what happens is it takes that pain and it encapsulates it. It wraps all this energy around it and it pulls it away from the self. So really, this is what's really happened. It goes back here. Now this thing is encapsulated. There's a hole here, and the energy is encapsulated by another energetic body to contain this pain. Now, this pain might have been the need for connection,
Mm.
wanting to be held and rocked right, rocked left, which develops the brain. And I'm not getting this. I needed that. So my screaming and crying for connection gets encapsulated back here.
Yeah. It's gonna be a hole there soon. Yeah.
That's what it looks like.
Oh, okay.
And now, guess what happens to me the next time I need
When the,
connection? Guess
yeah.
what happens? I don't need it anymore. That part of me is gone. And that part
Oh,
of me has had to cope by shutting down that part of myself, because now it's stuck back here in this encapsulated body of energy. And I don't
but
even
that,
know.
yeah, but
And
that
so
comes at a
then
price,
I
right?
go up and listen to this. I fast forward, I'm 35 years old and I'm married, right? And my wife comes to me and says, sweetie, I need a hug. Okay. When I needed a hug, it's stuck back here, right? Okay. Honey, I really need a hug. Again? You need a hug again? Like, come on. You're so needy.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it looks like later on. Because my need for a hug was never met. That part of me had to get encapsulated. The pain was too great. And now when someone else in my life needs a hug, one of the solutions is, I don't need hugs. Why do you need hugs? Because it's stuck back here. That's kind of what happened. So that's an adaptive strategy, meaning I can't live with the part of me that needs affection, because when I needed it, it was so painful that it didn't come. I screamed for 2 hours. I thought I was going to die. I will never let myself go through that again. And this is not happening consciously. This is the body is saving
Yeah.
your life. The body is encapsulating the pain that was unbearable. So this is happening all through childhood. The little boy that reached out, mommy, I need a hug. Get out of here. I'm washing dishes. I don't have time. My hands are wet. I mean, the stuff we do that hurts our children is unbelievable. We have no idea we've done it. We have no idea we've hurt the child. We thought we were being practical. We thought they were asking too much. And it's amazing. And this is happening all the time. And this is preventable through conscious
Yeah.
parenting. I'm so involved right now in bringing the Enneagram to parenting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
the fact that the part of me that will feel confident and safe asking for affection when I'm grown up, I have to release this first. This has to become unencapsulated so that I can own the part of me that needs holding again. I can be with that person. I can be with the little innocent person who will go up to my partner and say, sweetie, I need a hug, and not feel shame for asking. There's a lot of people that cannot ask for affection in our society because things like this happen. And depending on your Enneagram type is how you're going to form a solution to that particular pain of not being given affection, or the pain of someone wanting you to be different than who you are, or the pain of being humiliated when you made a mistake. Each Enneagram type has different resources for handling a particular miss over another kind of a miss, handling a particular trauma over another kind of trauma. We do have different resources based on these Enneagram patterns. We have strengths that we come in with. We have resources that are wired into our central nervous system based on the type we have a proclivity to developing into. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. So the Enneagram, going back to why is it so important? Because it allows me to do this. It allows me to using my Enneagram type understanding and understanding my childhood to unpack these encapsulated wounds, return them back to the all of me. Now look I have a little hole here.
Yeah.
I got
Yeah.
a big crinkle there, but it's all mine again. And while there's crinkles there, I don't have to be ashamed of anymore. And I don't have this story of, I don't ever need a hug. Why do you need a hug? That story's gone because I'm not ashamed of my own having needed a hug way back when. So the Enneagram gives us a chance to uncrumple the wounding of our particular type structure and our particular mechanisms for forming solutions to the pain. What is the pain? What is the pain? The pain for my fellow in prison was the pain of walking around 24 hours a day feeling utterly worthless. That is suffering at the worst level. Walking around 24 hours a day feeling you're stupid. I work with people that actually believe they're stupid. They're incredibly intelligent people. Where'd they get that interpretation of self? Or you walk around 24 hours a day feeling ugly or feeling wretched or feeling not enough.
Yeah.
I mean, like, that's suffering. That stops you from showing up in life. It stops you from meeting someone you'd like to meet. It stops you from introducing yourself to people. It stops you from getting up in front of the classroom, asking a question that might serve everybody, but you're so afraid you'll look stupid, you can't even ask questions anymore. That's what the pain is, that the Enneagram helps us resolve, become friends with, be less afraid of, right? This is what becoming whole again. Oh, I got to be whole. We got to be whole. What does being whole means? It means undoing this. So I'm not ashamed of my stupid questions. I'm not ashamed of the fact that we all feel worthy sometimes. It's not life or death like it was for this poor young man who shot this boy because he didn't turn around.
Crazy.
That's how severe his suffering was. He killed somebody to not feel it, to show his power. And can you imagine? I bet this guy didn't hear him. And that breaks my heart, that there was so much suffering in this young man that he had to kill someone to try to come out of that pain of not being worthy, of being a big nothing, like probably he grew up feeling perhaps with his own father,
Well, that's a really insightful conversation, Susan. I think for me, the problem with the entire suffering game itself is that playing game itself is hard, but it feels like you're playing the game blindfolded.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's like you're playing a game blindfolded and you get hit and I'm like, what even happened? And I'm like, it's like someone's attacking you and you can't even see it. You know what I mean? That's what it feels like. So
we don't know, like we kind of, we sort of, we form an image of self.
Yeah.
This is really good. Oh, it's so perfect.
Yeah.
But this is really going on,
Yeah,
right?
I like that. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, but so the next interview, I really want to explore how the suffering manifests and kind of like why it's there, how it's there, what kind of need is it filling, what kind of relationship do you have with the need itself, and what kind of mechanism you're doing, and we'll like go through like centers of intelligence at a time, and we'll see how it goes. But that's the plan for the next video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Yeah.
Thank
Thank you,
you,
Susan.
Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for having me as well.